Hey everybody, it's been some time. I don't make that many videos anymore. Um, but I want to drop this one. So, to make it a little bit more simple when we talk about narcissism, psychopathy, and the whole dramatic cluster B of personality disorders and the abuse connected to it, let's simplify it and make three groups. Number one is the type 1 psychopath and the overt grandiose narcissist. Type 2 is the covert narcissist, the only real narcissist. And type 3 is the borderliner and the type 2 psychopath. So when we go back to number one, the psychopath and overt grandiose narcissists, these are people that are potentially high functioning in society, and have or display ego syntonicity, functioning reality testing, and a certain self-efficacy. So this means reality testing means they can distinguish between fantasy and reality, and they can tell apart internal objects and external objects. They can distinguish a real human being that is living outside of them from their internal representation of this person. Of course, psychopath is the best at all this. It goes so far that Professor Sam Vaknin would even argue that psychopathy is not a personality disorder, but just a very bold and blunt version of a human being that openly lives their predatory drives, something like that. So not a personality disorder because of the functioning reality testing and the goal orientation and a high functioning in general, even high levels of self-regulation. The narcissist, overt grandiose narcissist, is a little is a little bit less in this category, but we want to make it more simple, so we put them together in the same category. The overt grandiose narcissist, for example, makes himself and others believe that he is independent of people because he has so much attention and so many people who are connected to him, supplying him with supply, that he really believes that he is independent, and lives like that. The psychopath is the only one who really has an internal locus of control, meaning they really don't care what others think of them, but if they need others to think good of them, that they are pro-social and benevolent and altruistic, they can make a lot of people believe that this is the case because it's necessary to get their goal. So this would be a high-functioning, communal, or pro-social psychopath. However, this makes it again more complicated. Let's just say this is the first group, the number one group, and the number two group is the only real narcissist, the covert narcissist. Narcissism is on a spectrum, so if you have a person with narcissistic personality disorder and they get a lot of supply, they switch into group one because then they are an overt grandiose narcissist. All of the narcissists are vulnerable, and have a fragile sense of self, but when they have a lot of supply again, they have a stronger sense of self. So this is another category of of number one, also the psychopath, has a stronger sense of self. They have the strongest sense of self as well, while the covert narcissist has a weaker sense of self, is also vulnerable like any narcissist, but because they're in the covert state, they're not able to extract as much supply. They switch their cognitions and they are simply in the covert narcissistic state, which means they have it shows more that they have an external locus of control. They adopt more victimhood mentality, competitive victimhood mentality. They refer to external reasons when you ask them why they do what they do, and they have a grandiose fantasy. Yeah, they have a grandiose sense of self, which is strange because they present themselves as a victim. They want all benefits of their pathology of being unable to do things because the world is so unfair. Everybody is evil and is conspiring against them. But at the same time, they feel entitled and grandiose in some way. So this is the number 2 in the group, and number 3 is the borderliner and the type 2 psychopath. These are the most dysregulated, emotionally most dysregulated ones. So type 2 psychopath is something completely different than the type 1 psychopath, who is detached from emotions, represses anxiety and emotions all along. The type 2 one is haunted by this and has low impulse control, has no sense of self. There is no self. Like the borderliner, there is no self. It's no constellated self. So they have to externalize everything. They are highly dependent of their environment, of people around them. They struggle with introject constancy. And it's a complete external locus of control. They have no control what they do. Of course, they come up with narrations of why they do what they do, but they will always point to external circumstances. All right, I think I just try to make it a little bit more simple. Clinicians might find differences and nuances and subcategories, but we can just speak of these number 1, number 2, and number 3. And it goes from the top, who has a strong sense of self, good reality testing, self-efficacy, ego syntonicity, to the lowest level of failed reality testing, no sense of self, ego dystony, and low self-efficacy, meaning they are not able, so in the lower groups, they are not able to function in different roles. Yes, but they have this grandiosity gap that, and this also shows the delusional side of it, that they somehow are entitled over others and are superior to others. And this leads me to one of the things I want to talk about today, the strange competitiveness of all of them, but especially of the group 2 and group 3. Why would a covert narcissist or a type 2 psychopath or a borderliner be highly competitive about anything? And they are, because they have this grandiose sense of self and the entitlement and this fantasy. This is probably also a sadistic fantasy, because at the end, so they have to be highly competitive, and inside their fantasy they win, and then they start to extract sadistic supply. And that is very confusing when you see that a person is not interacting with you and reality, but with their fantasy. And inside their fantasy, they have some form of superiority, they have won in something. And then they start to extract sadistic supply from enjoying their victory, which is often validated inside the the cult dynamic. If there is a cult around this person, a narcissistic cult, or if a psychopath is controlling these people as pawns, as codependent slaves, um, they might enable them because they use them as proxies. You know, the type 1 psychopath wants to project a perfect facade of emotional detachment, control, um, and always seem to be in perfect control and composure. Therefore, they need proxies to do the dirty work and to deflect the pathology onto them if necessary, but at the same time extract a sadistic supply of the slaves of them, the type 2 and type 3 personality disordered parts of the narcissistic family cult that that work according to their orchestrated network. So this is confusing for the victims, that people who bring nothing to the table, who weaponize pathology and learned helplessness, display utter, who weaponize their own pathology and their victimhood to extract supply and goals in societies. So they live as parasites and they have no self-efficacy. They can't function in different roles like work. They are not stable at having a constant employment, or are even employees, or function as a husband or wife in a social environment without creating trouble and drama. They have problems in parenting. Everything is dramatic and problematic, and they're always the victim, but they are always grandiose and superior to anyone, which is this huge confusing contradiction. So this is, I told you before, this is very confusing for the victims of this form of abuse, especially if the sadistic fantasy of these group 3 or group 2 people is validated and orchestrated by a type 1, group 1 psychopath. And then there is this whole cult environment where people are coerced to validate the sadistic, absurd, pathological fantasy. So, in other words, somebody starts to compete with you in things that you are. There's no question that there is no competition. You are, it's simply no competition. We don't live in a split world with only winners and losers, dark and light. We live in a nuanced world of many colors, and there is simply no competition in certain things, but you need to understand that the cluster B personalities all split. They live in another world. They are high competitive, and then they kind of try to suck you into this pathological fantasy of theirs that they live out independent of your reality. They only interact with an introject of you, with a fantasy version of you that is there for them to distract them of the grandiosity gap of reality. They have to be protected of reality, of what they really are. If they would see who they really are, they would have huge levels of anxiety and terror. So they need to create this fantasy of superiority and grandiosity, and this must be validated in a coerced, cultish, closed environment by people who are either psychopathic or narcissistic enablers or codependents, or coerced members of the cult who simply have the function of being an audience that regulates the emotions of these people and to validate the theater play that is happening. And this is confusing for victims of this form of abuse. There's many things that we can do to get out of this, but it takes a long time and it can be a very bumpy ride. Of course, no contact is the best thing to get out. No contact. Before Samvaknin made a video about it, I already recommended to use artificial intelligence to Greyrock the narcissist, meaning you only write emails or messages via the use of artificial intelligence that takes out your emotionality, because narcissistic abuse is reactive abuse. It's based on a malignant shared fantasy, as I told you, with these sadomasochistic tendencies and delusional fantasy. So they never interact with you, so they don't deserve your emotions or your reactions at all. So use artificial intelligence to take out your emotionality and keep it on an informative, unemotional level. And it also helps to understand the pathologies, so these people can't do different. They don't interact with you or with reality. They simply interact inside their fantastic parameters, inside a defensive compensatory mechanism for the lack of a constellated self. If we talk about group 2 or group 3, if we talk about psychopath, it's a person that is all about the facade, all about fake it till you make it, but they never make it. It's a person that lives on the surface, that tries so hard to create the perfect surface, the perfect image, the perfect mimicry, the perfect display. But ultimately is like a functioning machine detached from emotions and natural cognitions. Anyway, so what we also can do is we can force these people into reality by exposing the truth. Exposing the truth goes at the cost of your intimacy, but the shame and the guilt is on the side of the pathological, of the pathology always. So it's not shameful to be victim of abuse if you reject the abuse as soon as you see it and you step out of the dynamic and you resist it. There's no shame in this. It can happen to everybody. But of course, speaking the truth goes at the cost of your intimacy. And there's also the problem that not everybody will immediately believe you. There is the secondary gaslighting problem, because a narcissistic family cult led by a capable, high-functioning psychopath can project this cult fantasy reality, this Disneyland fantasy, quite far into even institutions and far-going circles of people. But one thing you need to do is you need to be functioning and take care of business yourself. You need to work on your responsibility 100%. You can't hold others accountable and make them responsible if you are not. So if you take care of your own side, then you can hold others accountable as well and point out the deficiencies in the 3 pillars of mental health, which are self-efficacy, ego syntonicity, and reality testing. I would also add real empathy. not cold empathy, not mimicked empathy, not parasitized empathy, real empathy. Um, and you can point out the deficiencies. You can point out how inside the cult's dynamic, uh, the dysfunctions, the the entitlement, the defiance of authority, the absence of common sense, and many other dysfunctions. You can point them out, but you need to involve other parties to do so. You can point out the dependency of group 2 and group 3 personalities, which they hate because they only want the benefits of being pathologic, of being victims, but they want to live inside their protected shared fantasy space as grandiose, omnipotent personalities. It's a fantasy. So you can point out their dependency of others, their impotence actually, which will force them to get in contact with reality, and also will force them to accept your externality and your self-agency. You are not their introject. You are not part of their fantasy. You are not an unalived, internalized object. You are an agentic person that is living their own life, and they can't use you for their Disneyland plans and for their fantasy. So you can use these things, confront them. You can confront the type 1 people, the psychopath, with the reality of the lack of empathy, how they are goal driven, how they hide behind indifference. You can show all of this, how they create this internal fantasy dynamic that is harmful for people. And it will take a long time. You need to take care on your own side in order to hold others accountable. But ultimately, it will show that a lot of people will see the truth, but they need to see the truth themselves. You can't make them see the truth. So it doesn't help to explain them what is happening. They must experience it, but slowly but surely the things will show, and you will get more respected. The next thing is that people who fall for this kind of abuse often are people pleasers, or people with a high need for harmony, people who learned that they have to perform in some way to be seen and heard and loved, and this is being weaponized against them. Even to have a moral core and a human core, having parental reflexes, all of this can be weaponized against you. The group 2 and group 3 people, the covert narcissist, the borderliner, and the type 2 psychopath, use control from the bottom, while the overt narcissist and the psychopath, group 1, use overt control mechanisms. All of this comes together as coercive control. And this is very painful, but you can expose these patterns if you are very consistent. All of this, the goal of this is always to extract supply. The psychopath wants to extract goals, and they also extract sadistic supply, as I told you. Yeah, so you can confront all of this, you can point it out, you can involve other parties. It will show that a lot of harm is happening, and you're not involved in this harm that is happening. It's not you who did this. All of this comes at the cost of intimacy. That's also why I stopped making so many videos, because I am enjoying the intimacy with myself, my own development that I do. I just wanted to point out this bundled information. For professional information, I would refer to Professor Sam Wagner and Richard Grannon, but I just wanted to put this one out. We were talking about people pleasing and people who have a high need for harmony, uh, and and have learned that they have to perform to be heard and seen. This is being weaponized. What you need to learn is to live comfortably in conflict and with ambiguity. This is terrifying in the beginning, but it's the only way to get to peace. You have compromised probably too much, and you have found solutions for to avoid conflict because you thought that would bring peace, but it brings not peace. This brings hell. So you need to learn to get comfortable with conflict. You need to get comfortable with ambiguity, develop ambiguity tolerance, develop conflict tolerance, and make no compromise in conflicts. So point out what your abusers do, hold them accountable, go to conflict with them, and enjoy that process. Stay in the conflict, because otherwise the solution, that's what they want. They want you to make another compromise. They want, after being parasitic predators, being completely immoral and psychopathic, after they do this, after they show the most sadistic narcissistic family cult dynamics, when they finish this circle, they just want to flex back into normal life like nothing ever happened, right? So don't let that happen. I mean, you're standing for something, you're having your own reality, and you can't always compensate for everything. Okay, the damage that has been done, but you will not fix everything and compensate for everything. And it's not your responsibility to make peace. It's their responsibility to make peace, actually. So learn to live in conflict. Learn to be comfortable in conflict and ambiguity. This leads to peace, to go to your own goals. You don't have to perform to be heard and seen. You have to be stubborn, all right? And you deserve it.